Welcome to another edition of the Argus Media Methanol Market Puts-and-Takes podcast, part of the Chemical Conversation series. In this special edition of the series from the sidelines of the 2024 Argus Methanol Forum in Houston, we feature the global methanol team in a roundtable conversation, featuring Vice President of Methanol and Derivatives Dave McCaskill, Senior Analyst Cassidy Staggers, Lead Consultant of Fuels and Octane Roel Salazar, Head of European Methanol Victoria Baghdjian, and Lead Methanol Consultant to Asia, Becky Zhang. The team will be covering the various topics and talks which took place over the last couple days here at this year's forum. Let's kick things off with Dave.
Thanks, Jason. I think to start this off, the elephant in the room, to say it that way, is the Sunday evening announcement that Methanex intends to buy OCI's methanol business. And I can certainly guarantee all of you listening, there were far, far more questions than there were answers. Methanex intends to acquire assets in Beaumont, part of the nat gasoline unit, and the two facilities in the Netherlands that have been idled for a good while, but that may change. So, again, I wish we could give answers. We can give you 100 questions, but we don't know, and we won't know until it's finalized.
My interesting observations were all the discussion on carbon intensity. I thought they talked and had good discussion around that in the methanol as marine fuel panels. So that was just new things to consider and things that have progressed even since the forum last year. I also liked Dario from ISCC spoke. That was interesting to me, and the certifications, and he'll give more details on that later this week as well. And the policy discussions from Jeffrey on RNG Coalition, and then Larry also spoke on IRA. Larry Nevin from Methanol Institute spoke on IRA and formaldehyde policy, which was new to me. So those are definitely my highlights.
I had an interesting observation from Becky's presentation on Asia methanol. So it seems like in the next 3 to 4 years, there's quite a bit of naphtha crackers that are coming online. And as part of these expansions, it's also going to include MTB expansions as well. This is going to increase methanol demand into the MTB sector. But one of the most interesting things about this is that fuel demand is declining in China. So because of this, we're expecting that this could cause higher exports of MTB going forward.
So we heard a lot of detail in the discussions on low-carbon methanol, but I thought it was interesting that while participants in the marine fuel arenas were accepting to some extent of the higher costs of low-carbon methanol, perhaps there were limitations and more challenges on the level of acceptance we see in some consumer goods industries, particularly in Europe.
One spotlight from the conference is that Argus will launch its first green methanol prices out of China. And it's a cost calculation based on the 6 modeled cases. And we are launching the price is to offer the industry a reference price for the green methanol price levels from Asia.
I think another takeaway I see from coming out of these several just great presentations, each year we do supply and demand analytics updates, and we're in the middle of our fall update. Better GDPs, thinking that demand was going to be at some level better, which it will be, capacity expansions that are going to continue. Probably now my homework is to go back home and reduce some demand in some of the China sectors, reduce some demand in some of the GDP-driven sectors, but likewise look at the delaying some of the new capacity. We've got better clarity in the last few weeks than we had when we were looking at this. So a little bit lower demand, not as optimistic, still positive. A little bit slowed capacity keeps things better and balanced.
And then during the conference, people were discussing, what comes next after that first closure. We know that next year some refinery capacity will be taken out, some refinery-linked methanol production capacity. And we also know downstream that it's very challenging for the European industry as a whole when you look at derivative manufacturing with the high cost of operating, high energy prices, and what that looks like going forward relative to other producing regions such as Asia?
Yeah, talking about Asia, we really are expecting the huge expansions mainly in the downstream acetic acid and for MTBE sectors, as well as MTO. They will bring another 3 projects up in the coming years. But on the other side, we are also facing a severe oversupply along the years with more capacities. Industries are facing oversupply situation, and that will bring down the overall operating rates and the margins as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting fact that there's going to be quite a bit of a MTBE expansion in China, despite that we are seeing gasoline demand falling in the region. EVs, electronic vehicles, have made a big impact in China the past few years, and it's our understanding that the market share of new vehicle sales are made up to 40% of EVs. So we're starting to really see that decline. So it's a bit surprising that there's going to be more MTBE expansions there. So now the question is, is operating rates are going to fall, or are we just going to see quite a bit of MTBE exports out of the region? And where can that product go? Is it going to end up in the rest of Asia, or if they're going to target the Americas, Europe? It'll be interesting to see what happens in the future.
So I want to talk a little bit more about low carbon methanol. Obviously, that was a very important topic the past couple days. Lots of talk on carbon intensity, what kind of pricing mechanics can be combined with carbon intensity. I thought it was interesting, Anita from ProMan's comment when she was on a panel was that there needs to be certified carbon emissions. Hopefully that's something we're working towards. I know that ISCC presentation from Dario provided clarity, because I feel like there's a lot of confusion on that, particularly in North America, as producers are just starting to get certified. Also, Jeffrey from the RNG Coalition talked about the impending November 21st, 2024 deadline of the union database and the effects that will have on the low carbon methanol world, specifically biomethanol. So that was interesting insight from him and clarity of what we can look forward to. And as with all of this, it's very much a waiting game, a waiting pattern. And then one of the bigger things that we're waiting on as far as policy is IMO. When will they give guidance and direction on that? And I know they're working with the Methanol Institute, so we're hopeful that it'll be simple, clear guidelines, but still continuing to wait for direction. So as Dave mentioned earlier, some answers, but also a lot more questions. Becky, China is progressing well into green methanol. So kind of what was your takeaways? Anything to add?
Yeah, Chinese have announced a lot of green methanol projects in the past 2 years. A lot of these are based on the hybrid technology, which is a combination of E and biomethanol. But I've also heard a lot of innovative technologies around the conference. I'm interested about the HYCO 1's reformer. They provide a solution for the syngas with no coking, and it can utilize 95% of CO2 to make the low carbon chemicals, not only methanol, and with no coking generated through the process. And another interesting technology is from M2X, who are utilize the CH4, the methane, to produce the biomethanol. So these are quite innovative, and we believe there will be a new biomethanol production coming out likely next year or the year after. But it's the progress is still slower than expected.
Becky, piggybacking, I think, on a few things you said, also what was interesting to me was as producers are looking at technologies and processes to making low carbon, where to me, North America, maybe Europe, is looking at sequestering CO2 as part of their process to reduce their carbon footprint. China seems to be much more directionally going with taking CO2 as a feedstock and taking someone's emissions and then using that feedstock to make methanol. Endpoints get the same. I think China ends up with lower carbon intensity kind of scores, but it's just interesting to see the different direction those are going. So in closing, I'd like to wrap this up with a couple of points, and I'm going to stay on low carbon methanol for a bit. I think, again, my takeaway, I would say 1 and 2 years ago, there was a higher level of euphoria in the low carbon space. And by that I mean buyers, shippers, the maritime sector were just in the mode of saying, just make it and we will come, we will buy. Price is irrelevant. And producers were learning e-methanol technology and saying, yes, we can do this, but it is going to be incredibly expensive. This year, again, more energy overall in the sector, but I think, and I'm going to use the word reality in my thinking, buyers are realizing that e-methanol may be prohibitively priced and that green, bio, blue will be just fine on meeting the necessary regulations and succeeding in their environmental goals, and that's all a positive thing. I think at the same time, producers are seeing the challenges with e-methanol production and that indeed it's going to be costly. There may or may not be renewable electricity available at the scale they need. So those are interesting challenges. I just think tactically buyers and sellers are coming closer together. And then I think we would be remiss if we didn't at least make some comments about pricing. And not that I can tell any of you or all of you that my views have been accurate year to date. First, if I talk about the Atlantic Basin, prices are nearer their peak than not. Are we through? Not necessarily. Do I think we have the opportunity to trend down? Are the circumstances or the environment is right to trend down over the rest of this year? I think there are signals that suggest that. MTO, key in helping guide world methanol prices. Olefin prices, ethylene and propylene, are not improving greatly. That's going to hamper the Asia prices. Now, there's the dichotomy that there's been a huge separation between Atlantic Basin and Asia prices. So we could see Asia prices softening more. I do think Atlantic Basin prices soften, and I'm probably more speaking in terms of the spot markets. Atlantic Basin prices have to start coming back directionally toward China's level. Gap's not going to close entirely, but I think we're poised to see directionally lower trending prices. A caveat, we probably see Q4 Europe bump up, posted price. And that's just catching up to the current tightness, catching up to U.S. or North America price increases. So I want to say there's a trend downwards, but of course, at any point in time, that doesn't mean there will be upward blips. Thank you very much.
And thanks to Dave, Cassidy, Roel, Victoria, and Becky for giving us a rundown of the events and topics from this year's Argus Methanol Forum from Houston on this edition of the Methanol Puts-and-Takes podcast, a production of Argus Media, a leading independent provider of pricing and commodity market information. For more details on Argus's methanol services, make sure you visit argusmedia.com.